Okay, thank you all so much for joining me today. My name is Melissa, and I am a success enthusiast here at SoGoSurvey. That means my job is to get, of course, people into the platform and excited about the projects that they're doing. And in that regard today, we're talking about some of our more advanced features, including piping, pre-population, quota management, branching, question display logic. Some of these are features that you might already be familiar with, but I want to cover for each of these how it works, the basics, seeing it live, and also seeing it within the account, how to build it. What problem does it solve, or how does it help? A lot of these items are especially around the idea of building engagement with your participants and improving your data quality. Of course, both of these are good goals. We hope you agree. And the last piece of that is best practices and suggestions for their use. So without too much further ado, we're going to take each one at a time. So we'll start with piping. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask while I'm reviewing these features today, but we'll of course pause again at the end. So piping is a very simple feature, and that's why I've added it first here. They're in a little bit of sequential order on purpose, of course. Piping is a really great feature that takes a participant's answer from one page and adds it into a question on a later page. This is really great because it helps participants to feel engaged. Sometimes we're using, for example, their name in a similar style as like mail merge, for example. So if you see your name later in a survey, it helps you to be more engaged and attentive because you feel like it's directed at you. But also it helps your participants to focus on some relevant data. I'm going to show you an example of what I mean by that in a relatively live survey. Of course, you'll see that it's a preview, but this is the one that we're using for our testing today. So on my first page of the survey, you'll see I have a little employee survey here, and I want people to tell me what their primary work location is. So I'm going to choose Apple Hill in this case. I'm going to say no, not a manager. We'll come back to some of these other questions later and other features. But on the next page, you're going to see the answer that I provided on the first page is now piped in to the question here. And that helps me to make sure participants are focusing on facilities. For example, how would you rate the quality of your facilities? I want them to focus on at a specific location, not maybe the company in general, but at the specific location, and so that I'm sure they're responding to that specifically because I've piped in that answer. So let me show you what this looks like within the platform. You will see I've got my little test survey in here. I've got my questions all laid out. Of course, you can see that I've got the first question up there. I'll repeat again, but it's a really great idea to make that a mandatory question. So I've got my question in there. That's the piped from question, I'll call it. And I've got my piped to question a little bit farther down here. And this is question 7 in the survey. So to add piping in here, all I need to do is edit just this question, get rid of it as it is. And you'll see that what I need to do is choose the location where I'd like to insert that answer and put the cursor right there. And you'll see that I've got a little piping icon. As soon as I click on it, it gives me literally a little pipe to pull over there. When I click into the right location, I'm prompted to identify the right piped from question. So in this case, it was primary work location. And I'll hit save, and you'll see it'll show up with this little code here. But as long as someone puts in that correct answer, we'll be able to see that answer filled in that question. So again, piping really great. Pulls it from an earlier page into a later page, so that's something to remember, that they need to be on separate pages. And also it's a really important idea to set that question as mandatory, so we're sure that people are answering the first question and they don't see a blank or code or something like that when they see that second question. The final reminder on this feature is to double check the spacing, the language, to make sure the flow of your sentence works in that follow-up question. To make sure that you have enough space between punctuation, commas, whatever it is that you're using, to make sure that it looks like that is sort of a normal part of the follow-up sentence. So that's the first one, piping, a really great feature to have, again, for engagement and improving the quality of your data. Next up is pre-population. As you can see, this is done in advance. This is done before you actually send out your survey. But the basic idea here is that you already know something about your participants, and you don't need them to answer those questions. So you're going to be choosing, you see here on the left here how it works, choosing 1 or 2 key questions, could be more if you like, that are going to be identified for pre-population. You need to make sure that you have this data. Of course, for example, if you already know what department people work in or what their hire date is, for example, So you can upload those answers in a contact list. And then those answers are going to be matched in distribution, so you'll be able to see all of those results in reporting. So, of course, this is a really great thing to be able to save participants time, especially if you're going to pre-fill that information for them. And it also can improve that data quality. So there's always a risk when you give people the chance. Sometimes they give misinformation intentionally or accidentally. But if you already know the real answers, there's really no need to ask, rather than the fact that you need that data for the reporting. So because you're giving them a shorter set of questions, because you're pre-filling information, you're not insulting them by asking questions you already know the answer to, it really does raise engagement. So we strongly recommend pre-population when you have that data available. So again, let me show you what this looks like within the platform. You will see we've got a nice looking, we've got a nice looking example of this one here in pre-population. Something funny is happening over here on my other screen. We've got a nice looking example of pre-population within the platform here, because we've got, for example, back up at the top of this page, the hire date is one of the questions in this survey. So if you are my employee, it does not make sense for me to ask you your hire date, because I already know this information. However, it might be something that I need to include in my report, so it is something that I'd like to have included in the survey. So you'll see I've already set pre-population here. There's a little icon that lets me know that it's been set. So I'm going to set this question for pre-population. This is available under More, Data Population, and a few different options. There's post-population too here, of course, another good feature, but we're focusing on pre-population here today. So 3 options, pretty literal. Pre-population read-only, which means that people will be able to see the answer that's filled but won't be able to change it. Pre-editable, they'll be able to see the answer that's filled and they can change it. And pre-hidden, so you've filled in the answer and they don't even see the question or the answer. So I've chosen pre-editable here. And you see that I've set it, so it's appearing right here, pre-editable. So when I preview my survey, that will show up because it's a visible choice that it's pre and editable. The other thing that I'll need is when I'm getting ready to launch, I'm going to need to have all of this information in a spreadsheet so I can upload it in my contact manager. And in this case, each of my entries, for example, is an email-based list. So I'm going to have the email address as well as the hire date. And so when I send out my invitation, that information is going to be matched to the survey itself, and my team members who receive this will have their hire dates already filled in. Because I've set it as pre-editable, if there are any mistakes, they can make those changes if they want to, but otherwise, it's already filled in for them. So really great pre-population. Make the choice that makes the most sense for your team. If you're sure of the information, it's probably okay to make it hidden, or if you know that they need a chance to make some changes based on anything, changes in circumstances, that kind of thing, you want to make sure that you're choosing the right kind. But the biggest piece for pre-population, of course, is to make sure that that data is available. If you don't have hire dates or you don't know people's position titles, something like that, then you can't use pre-population. Okay, so pre-population, a really great feature, just like all the rest of them. P.S. I'm not going to tell you that any of these are not good features. All of these are great, and that's why we've chosen them for today. Next up is quota management. Really great, especially for registration forms or registration for a webinar, for example. That there are only a certain number of slots available. So you want to make sure that no one gets frustrated by registering for something that's already full. So in this case, how it works, you're going to be choosing a key question, such as which time slot would you like to sign up for. Identify what those limits are. For example, 10 people are allowed to join a certain group. And what should happen when that session is full. So you'll be able to see that it can be removed from the list or explained, for example, this is already full. So I'm going to show you what that looks like within our example survey here. So I've chosen, because mine is an employee survey as an example here, I've chosen the idea of focus groups. So you see that maybe for a focus group, we only have a select number of participants slots. So you'll see, to be able to set that quota management, you see I've already applied it here. It's a little icon that lets you know it's there. But you'll be able to do this under More, Set Answer Quota. So when I click this icon, it's going to tell you You can choose which items are available. For example, maybe on Friday we have tons of space, so I don't need to set a limit. But on the rest of the days, we only have space for 10 people. So once we get to 10, what should happen next? What's the action? So we have two options. One is remove from list. So if I choose remove from list, this option won't appear for any future participants. They won't see it as an option available. Or I can also choose grayed out so that people see that it was an option, but I'll give them the explanation. Sorry, we're full, or you can register in person but not online anymore, something like that. If you have multiple languages here, you will see multiple columns here, but in this case, my survey is just in English, so you just see one column. So again, really good feature for managing events and registration, especially useful so you don't have to sit there and manually track every single thing, and you certainly don't want your participants to be frustrated. You want people to sign up and to join your events, not to feel upset that you misled them about something that was available when it turned out not to be. Keep in mind this is for use on specific question types. Of course, it doesn't make sense on certain types of questions, for example, text box. But drop-down radio button, horizontal radio button, all of those single select questions you can set a limit for, as well as with multi-select checkbox and list box. So keep in mind usually a date or time, but it could be any number of other things, especially a finite set of resources, or first come, first serve is sort of the idea of quota management to make sure that your platform is managing it instead of you doing it manually. Next up is branching. So branching and the last item that we'll talk about in a moment, question display logic, both of them are based on the idea of logic, which says only ask people questions that are relevant to them. When you ask people relevant questions, of course it shortens the surveys and it improves your data quality, but also keeps people engaged. There's nothing like saying does not apply, or not me, or saying no, no, no in a series to make you feel disengaged, like this survey is certainly not designed for you. So the idea of branching here is to set basically a path of what should happen when people are traveling through your survey. So if I'm getting to the survey and I see a yes question, a yes or no question, maybe yes takes me to one page and no takes me to another page. So you're basically setting the rules for which answers lead you to which next page. This is sort of the choose your own adventure style of features, and I'll show you what it looks like here in our sample survey. So restart my survey here so you can get to the first page. You see my branching question is going to be on here. And you see again my survey is about employees, but I also want to ask people who are managers an extra set of questions. So I'm going to have here Apple Hill again. Are you a manager is going to be my decision question. So if people say yes, I want them, when they go to the next page, to see another set of questions that are related to being a manager. If, however, people say no, I want the next set of questions to be sort of the last page, the sort of more general questions. So to be able to set this up within the platform, you will find that decision question, in which case mine was, are you a manager? You can see I've already applied branching here, so you've got a little icon for that too. Are you a manager is my decision question, so I need to apply branching. So branching here, it takes me to that specific question, and I can set the rules that I'd like to apply. So in this case, my answer option is yes or no. If someone says yes, I want them to go to the next page, because this is the one that has the questions about being a manager. If they say no, I want them to go to page 3, because that's the more general series of questions that everyone will be asking. You see that I also have an option for if not answered. However, it's grayed out, it's unavailable. And what that's a reminder of is that I've set this question as mandatory, which is certainly a best practice. I don't want people to be wandering through my survey, going to the wrong page potentially. I want them to make a decision here, yes or no. Keep in mind we don't need too many questions to be mandatory, but this is a really good use of mandatory to make sure that people answer your survey correctly and they're able to head on the correct path. I'll save. It's applied. Save is successful, and I can exit out of there. And again, you've got that confirmation that it's been applied, but you can also preview it in your preview survey. Branching, to remember, is a page-to-page function. So you're not jumping to different questions on the same page, but you're telling people, you go to page 2, you go to page 15, whatever it is. but you need to have those questions grouped on different pages. The decision question, again, should be set as mandatory to make sure that people answer it and they don't end up on the wrong page accidentally. And finally, about branching, we've looked here just at an example of a simple branching style so that decision is based on one specific question. Yes, you go here. No, you go here. But you also have the ability to set up what we call advanced branching, which means that you're choosing multiple conditions that will decide a participant's path. So for example, you might have someone who is a manager at Apple Hill see one set of questions, and a manager at some other location will see a different set of questions. So advanced branching can be really useful if you're trying to target specific questions for a very specific group of people. Demographics are a really common reason to do this in sort of the customer side of things. People, certain demographic information, gender, income, education, all of those can be used as conditions that you're setting your advanced branching rules on. Okay, so our last choice for today here, again, there are a lot of really great choices, but tried to narrow it down for you to focus on a few of the strong recommendations we have here. This last one is question display logic, commonly referred to here as QDL. So the idea of QDL is very similar to the idea of branching in that there's a logic to why you're seeing certain questions. Again, we want to keep people engaged. We don't want to ask people irrelevant questions. And we also want to shorten surveys as well to keep people happy and moving through quickly. So again, you're going to be choosing a decision question. But here with question display logic, you have the option to decide where that follow-up question should appear. If you like, especially if it's a quick sort of aside question, you have the ability to include this on the same page. If you prefer, if you'd like to have that related follow-up question show up later in the survey, that's okay too, but QDL can be set on the same page. So we're going to apply question display logic here so you can see exactly what this looks like. So you may have noticed on my survey, and I'll restart this one here, I have this question after are you a manager? It says, are you an associate manager or a senior manager? Now, you already know that this question only makes sense for people who say yes. If I say no, it doesn't make any sense for me to see this question. So I'd like to show it for people who say yes and hide it for people who say no. And question display logic is the perfect way to do that. I'm going to click here under Designer, and I'm here at the target question. This is the show hide question, we call it. I'm going to click here under More and select question display logic. And you'll see a reminder here that says, make sure everything is set before you apply question display logic. It's a really great reminder. Remember that logic is based on a certain set of rules and having your questions in a certain order. So we want to make sure that this is the last thing that you do when you're building your survey, which is why we've targeted it for last today. So again, we've got that show hide question. We want some people to see this and others not to. So the preceding question is the decision question that decides whether we should show or hide it. So here we've got, are you a manager, is my decision question. And I want, is one of the following, and is yes. So if someone says yes to this question, then they should see this question. I could also set several other rules. What happens if they say no? For example, should they see a different question instead? In this case, it's a very simple example. So you can see I've got that little icon that lets you know that QDL has been applied, and I want to get a new version of my survey here so I can preview it and see if it's been applied correctly. So again, I'm going to choose Apple Hill. Are you a manager? Yes. Hopefully if I click yes, this second follow-up question will pop up, and it does. And if I click no, it should disappear, and it does. So in good shape. So again, question display logic can appear on that same page. It's really useful for a quick, like I said, a quick aside or a quick follow-up rather than an extended series of questions. That extended series of questions is very often used for branching because we're sending people on a totally different path. But question display logic, I sort of like to think of as the follow-up question or the aside. Because you said this, I want to know more about it. But people who didn't agree to that, for example, we don't need to ask them that follow-up question. So again, decision question is mandatory is probably a good idea, especially if you want people to be able to answer that follow-up question. But do remember to set this one last because you've got all the right questions in order, but having those sort of final bows on top, you want to make sure that that's one of the last things that you do to make everything look good. So those are the topics that we chose here for today, some of our 5 advanced options that can help you with your survey, both improving data quality and enhancing engagement among your participants. So I'd love to take any questions that anyone has here for today. Again, there are an extensive number of advanced options that we have in our SoGoSurvey platform. I've chosen these ones based on design, knowing that the design portion of the platform, of course, there are a lot of options in there, but the changes and choices that you make in design dictate a great deal about your distribution, as well as the kind of quality reports that you're able to get. So erring on the side of earlier in the process, making better changes, keep in mind that we have a lot of other great advanced features that are available within the platform as well too. So if you have no questions, feel free to, of course, follow up with me after we've finished today. But I will remind you to check out within our platform our user guide and help section. It's always available in the top right-hand corner of your screen. So you'll be able to sign up for future webinars, of course, connect with our team, see the user guide, and watch related videos as well too. So I strongly encourage you to check that out if you have not done so before. But at this point, I will say thank you for joining, and we will look forward to seeing you again next time for our next webinar. Have a great day.